Okay,
We,
well, first of all the questions were very interesting. So
yeah.
thanks for putting them up there for me. Okay, I can see the screen. I can see the screen now. I see the comments. And the first question is, if cross-displacement is a real thing, how
Hmm.
can megalithic sites, which are obviously older than is commonly accepted, retain stellar alignments? Well, first of all, I don't subscribe to Charles Hapgood's hypothesis of cross-displacement, where the
No, okay.
continents rearrange due to the Earth spinning too fast. And yeah, I've heard a little rumor there that he might be an ex-CIA. So I don't really know about that, but I don't subscribe to the physics of what he's saying. And number two, if the stars and constellations were not visible until about 7,000 years ago, let's say 7,500 years ago, and I will discuss the chronology of events a little bit later on. I have a table so people get an idea where I'm getting these dates from. And it's not based on Velikovsky's books, by the way. They match his timelines, but it's not based on him. And I will talk about who I'm getting these chronologies from. And they could not have seen the stars, so they couldn't have been built according to any constellations or star alignments. Megalithic sites. So do you understand what I'm saying? So if you have a pyramid, you're building it, and you're saying it's aligned to the stars. Well, obviously, you need to be able to see the stars. Otherwise, how are you going to do that if you have the plasma sheath of the red dwarf, the cocoon around you?
Hmm.
So I believe that either the pyramids must have been built if they are aligned to any stars and constellations after the red dwarf, the plasma sheath was gone. And I'm going to continue here. It will explain it further. Megalithic sites that are still visible to us or partially destroyed would have been constructed starting 8,500 years ago. Many pyramids and temples built after the constellations became visible, or about 3,000 years, 7,300 years ago, sorry, 7,000, not 73, 7,000 years ago, and got destroyed by catastrophes, were rebuilt on top of the old foundations with smaller stone blocks and were aligned differently to the original alignments, utilizing the current true north at the time it was rebuilt. And that's why you see a lot of pyramids in Mexico and around the world. You can see a lot of sites where you see the base. It's a big, big, megalithic foundation. And then on top of it, it's another pyramid built slightly off of that original alignment, or where it's not exactly fitting the top of the base, and it's facing to a different alignment, facing the north, that existed at the time the pyramid or the temple was built. And that is because there were axis changes. That's how that explains that. And there's groups of pyramids around the world. If you go to certain websites, they have the different pyramids around the world that have exactly the same orientations or angles that are off of true north, current true north. And then you could see which temples were built at different times, which I think is really fun, and you can figure that out. So that would point to an axis tilt of the Earth being slightly changed. The Earth has undergone many axis tilt changes recorded by the creation of new calendars or changes of the orbit of Earth. Earth has been moving through the solar system during the last 7,000 years, and it's being affected by the many interactions with several planetary bodies that it has come across. And you can read all about this in the War of the Titans and Theogony by Hesiod, all these interactions of planets. The fact that the great pyramids of Giza are aligned almost exactly to the cardinal points is either by chance, must be either by chance, or they had some ancient knowledge about physics of axis tilts, if Earth tilted for any reason, that the pyramid would always align to true north. Otherwise, I cannot explain that. There's no way I can logically explain how it matches right now true north. By the way, the ancient Egyptians, this is really interesting, used the helical rising of Sirius and the lunar month to track time from the 5th to the 25th dynasty, or until Thebes or Thebes. It's written two different ways, as per Manetho and Isaac Newton. That's what they say. Mm-hmm. So should I read the next question?
Yes, go ahead. That was good.
Okay, the next question. Please ask.
I'm getting it together here.
Sure, you continue. Why is Uranus on its side? Why did we get our water from there? Why does Uranus and Neptune have such offsets from center magnetic fields? I realize that she's not a scientist, but are there clues hidden in the myths? And why has the Thunderbolt Project and Dr. Talbot not covered Uranus like these? Okay, so yes, first, from the stories of creation and the myths, seems that we got some red salty water in our oceans from the floods created by the flaring of novas of Uranus. The water that was coming down during the first flood, which should be ascribed to Uranus if we follow the stories, kind of that's where it would have come from, was red. It was reddish and red. And there was a lot of salt, and the Himalayan salts, I think that those beautiful pink salts from that you can find in the Utah salt mines, which is called the real salt, or the Himalayan salt, pink salts, that are really high in minerals and really healthy for you. I believe that that's probably the time when they fell, when they came down with that flood. Then we also got water coming in from Saturn. Of course, Saturn went nova as well. Then Jupiter looks like went nova because it has rings as well. And we also got flooded during every single catastrophe after that. There was not as big as the flood of Noah or the one from Enoch's time, about 700 years before that. When we seem to have acquired the Dead Sea, I think that's from Jupiter's encounter, because according to Velikovsky, and I really suggest that if people have a real, well, they want to know where Velikovsky got also these ideas about the geology and many of his theories to be backed up by science. He wrote the book Earth in Upheaval. And right there, he goes into all the scientific research up until his time that he wrote the book that backed his timelines and the timelines of the Masoretic and other texts that I will talk about. Anyways, so that was Jupiter when there was a salts, probably of the Dead Sea that seemed to have been formed at that time, which are really rich in magnesium chloride, and they're also really good for you. They're really healthy. And also other floods that are recorded accompanying the catastrophes that were caused by Neptune or Poseidon, and Venus, Medusa, close approaches. And it's interesting that during the Venus approaches that are spoken of in Velikovsky's books and during the Exodus, and I'll get into that in a little bit, telling you all of those different floods with their timelines, with exact dates, approximate dates. They were actually accompanied by Neptune and Venus. It wasn't just Venus, but it was both of them that were kind of hanging out around Earth and causing all these catastrophes. Mm-hmm. So, according to Orphic Greek, Roman, Sumerian, Hittite, and stories of creation, Uranus or Ouranos, called also Caelus, which is the Roman translation for heaven or sky, who was also Anu of the Sumerians, was castrated and dethroned by his son, Saturn Kronos. or in some text by Jupiter, which is, I'll get into that too. Why Jupiter? So, and as the triple star system Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, that Earth belonged to, was captured by the Birkeland current of the sun, Apollo. Apollo, I call the sun, the current sun that we have, Apollo, because that's, maybe people will see, which won't get confused with which sun, which star are we talking about, because it gets confusing. Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter, Venus, Pluto, Mars, Mercury, Earth, and the Moon, all of these planets took part and tilt their axes, and orbits were affected somehow during the planetary war of the Titans, as described in Titanomachy. Titanomachy is the war of the Titans, and Hesiod's Theogony, the origin of the gods. That's what it means, Theogony. The electrical interactions between the planets of the solar system lasted for millennia, according to the historian and the chronologies. You need to ask the Thunderbolt projects and David Talbot why they haven't included Uranus, Mercury, Neptune, Jupiter, and the Moon in their theory. So that's not for me to answer, but that's a good question. Then, moving on. Question: if the Earth was in the plasma sheath or within the plasma sheath of either Saturn, Uranus, or Neptune, and the concept of time was unknown, how did the Vedic traditions figure out the yugas and the precession? And this is an excellent question, because it's like, yes, how did they do that if we were within the cocoon and we couldn't see the stars? That doesn't really make sense. So I have, oh, and by the way, I have to go back to the beginning and just say, all the answers that I'm giving are my guess and deductions from reading the histories and the sacred texts and the creation stories that I have come across. It's not that I say this is what it is and this is the only way it is, of course, and of course not. So this is just what I deducted from the information that I have come across.
Right. Yeah. It's
To
just
make it
interesting
clear.
information. Yes.
And you know, I'm always open to learning new things, because that's what I'm here to do, learn. I don't know everything, but I'm trying to learn. So anyways, so I accept, you know, new information very gladly and like to study that. Anyways, so going back to the yugas, and how did we know, how did the Vedic traditions know about the yugas? So my answer, it's indeed, it would have been impossible to see the constellations from within the red or brown dwarf. By the way, the Olmec and the Maya also had knowledge of the precession, but they called it the Great Year, which varied between 24,000 to 26,000 years. And they knew it was caused by the sun's orbiting or spinning behind the Birkeland currents of the central sun of the Pleiades, Alcyone.
Mm-hmm.
Were you saying something?
I was, yeah, I got a picture on the screen.
Excellent.
Yeah, you're doing great. I'm getting something done. So we're both doing good.
Yay. Okay. The Maya say that all their knowledge was given to them by the survivors of Atlantis. For example, Quetzalcoatl, who this time around arrived circa 1450 BC. I think they were all there before, way before, like 5,000 years ago. But this time, you have to understand that, everyone has to understand that with each catastrophe, every time that a catastrophe occurred, people died in certain places, certain land masses went underwater, some earthquakes destroyed completely the islands like Santorini and the Minoans, and you know, there was havoc in some places. So they moved around, they just went back and forth. And that's why you see like the Inca super old megalithic sites. So I'm not saying that they arrived only in 1450 BC. But Quetzalcoatl, who is known as Quetzalcoatl, who was supposed to be a man, they said he was a man, and he was white with long hair, and he's like described by the Mexican stories, different stories. There's many stories about the Olmecs and the Tula, the place of Tula, the giants of Tula, which are the Atlanteans. They call them the Atlanteans. So there are a lot of stories about that. But anyways, so the Maya knew about the precession of the equinoxes too. So anyways, then Quetzalcoatl, and they can read more about this in the Civilization of the Chem Anahuac ebook that I have under my books, under the tabs for ebooks by Tess. So the possibilities I can think of are, number one, that the Vedic traditions, the Maya, and all astronomical observations used with stone circles, that's what they were used for. They were calendars to see obviously the moon and the equinoxes, because that's all they could really track. And the obelisks, that was also what they were used for. They're not just phallic symbols like a lot of people like to say. No, they were calendars to track the movement of the sun or the moon or whatever. By the sun, I'm saying it could be the Jupiter or Sirius or Saturn or whichever sun was close to Earth. But anyways, and this observation must have begun after the castration and deposing of Uranus by Kronos Saturn, when the stars became visible, and somehow they were able to calculate the precession. Or the other possibility would be that all the worldwide stories of creation, well, the lords or the Elohim, the gods, which was a race very similar to the earthlings, arrived on Earth, for example, like the fallen angels that arrive in Mount Hermon, 200 of them, males. That's what I guess the Agada speaks about that, the rabbinical sources. And at Baalbek, which is very close to Mount Hermon, they arrive from the stars, which is what people thought, or that's what they write about them, or heaven, or from another planet. And they were capable, obviously, of space travel, and they had high astronomical and scientific knowledge. And so they must be considered as maybe being true. It's just a thought. The Sumerian texts say that the Anuna lords, according to Sumerian King's List, arrived about 120 SARS before the flood. When Columbus discovered America, the natives, according to the diary of his voyage, regarded him and his crew as having arrived from the sky and thought that he was Quetzalcoatl returning. I don't know if people know that, but I think that's kind of like a big clue. And
Indeed.
yeah, and similarly, in pre-diluvial times, some space travelers could have arrived and called themselves Elohim or El, which comes from Helios or Helios. And Helios means star. It actually doesn't mean just Saturn, it means star. So it could be the star Helios Saturn when it was a star, or Helios Uranus when it was a star, or Jupiter, or even our sun. So that's why there's that really confusion with the word Helios.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, the Agada tells of giants that attempted to leave Earth, but they were not able to. So these people that arrived, they wanted to get out of here, but they couldn't. The Orphic myths, that's what it says in their story. The Orphic myth says that Uranus was the abode of the gods, and that Uranus whirls, which means that it turns around an axis around the earthly ball. So that's quite interesting, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, the Bhagavat Puran describes Vishnu's eternal abode as the blue planets Vaikuntha. That's what they call it, Vaikuntha.
Yeah.
Which were Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Krishna's Goloka resided in Pluto. And the reason the Hindus' lords were depicted as humans with blue skin. So that's why they were depicted with blue skin, because it represented the planets that represented their eternal place of living. And that's what always...
What is this you're reading from again, Tess? I'm sorry.
Say that again?
What are you reading from again?
This is the Bhagavat Puran, the
Okay.
Puranas,
Hindus.
the Hindu. And people can go to the website. Everyone can go there, look at the images for mythos, and look at Vishnu. Just look at the image of Vishnu. You'll see the Hindu gods, the blue Hindu gods. They can click there. They can read and go to the link where I get this from. So I always try to put the link. And sometimes I put links that have the image and a little bit of the information, but sometimes it's not the best information and it's mixed up with a lot of disinformation, of course. So people have to be aware of that. Just because I share a link doesn't mean that everything that is there I subscribe to and it should be true. But anyways.
And if I can just say this to get it in real quick, you're reading from the text. This isn't your opinion. You didn't write this. You're merely reading.
I'm the messenger. Yes.
That's right.
Yes, I didn't channel it. I don't channel. I don't come up with things. I read and I make notes and I put things together.
Yes. Okay. Just wanted to get that right.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, and I always try to include the sources. Anyways.
Yeah.
So, from the king's lists that ruled before the flood, about 1,500 years passed between the landing and the deluge. That's about the timeline. They could have been escaping from their home planet to several planets like Mars, the Moon, and Earth from another catastrophe. They were escaping another catastrophe in the solar system that took place before Noah's deluge, like the one described as the dethronement and castration of Uranus by Kronos. So I suspect from that Uranus was just going, starting to go crazy and causing problems to other planets and, getting thrown CMEs or you name it, whatever. Or a moon got off of orbit. And so anyways, this is just a possibility. They must have known that Saturn and Jupiter's orbits were also approaching each other and expected more catastrophes. So they built their underground cities and they always lived on high altitudes. That's why you find all the beautiful temples and all the hermits and monasteries are always perched really high up on mountains. And they usually have an entrance to, or high altitude, high altitude. They don't do it. I mean, of course, after the floods, Atlantis got flooded, so you see temples right at very close to the water level, but a lot of them are far away, as high as they can go. And so moving on to the next question.
Yeah.
Asked, if you can ask me, has the second coming already happened, or is it still to come?
Yeah.
And I say this from a theological versus mythological perspective. And I really like this question because through my research, I came across a lot of information about this that I wasn't even looking into, like purposely. It was not my interest, but I was like, wow, really? Oh, I got to make a note of this. This is really interesting. So I'm going to talk about what I found. And it doesn't mean any disrespect to anyone that believes in Jesus. Not at all. I think that he really existed and so it's not about that he didn't exist. Of course, in the contrary, it's information about his story, what is known about him. Right. So here you go. The word Christ comes from the Greek, Christos, and from the Hebrew, Meshiach. And I'm sorry if I don't pronounce this correctly because I don't speak Hebrew, but I know how Shekinah, now I learned. Shekinah, some people say Shekinah in the United States, but the correct pronunciation is Shekinah. So I learned that. So maybe it's Meshiach. So I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing it right, but I'm trying to learn. Means anointed or chosen one, and was used in ancient Egypt and since Sumerian times. For example, by Marduk, Buddha, Lord Buddha, Cyrus the Great, Julius Caesar, King Louis XIV of France, and Sabbatai Zevi in 1666. These are just a few little examples. There's a lot. Most of the rulers, when they died, the same thing. It was like a formula, like a repeat that they did. So these are just a few examples of messiahs and saviors.
Okay.
And this happened each time the world was expected to end by a planetary catastrophe. The messiahs or savior's job was to redeem by conversion the souls of sinners in order to be saved by a specific religion. The
Yeah.
sinners live on probation on earth. That's the kind of like the premise. I don't agree with this, but I'm just passing on the way they think. The sinners live on probation on earth and can be redeemed, which means forgiven for their sins, only by the Messiah sacrificing his life, such as Jesus did in the cross, which I never knew about this. You know, I was raised in the Catholic faith and I never, ever heard of this. So it's quite interesting. I'm learning a lot about it. I don't practice, but like I have said in my website. Regarding Yeshua or Jesus' first coming, I found that Halley's Comet was seen in 12 BC. And the Star of Bethlehem was probably and allegedly, from sources that I read, and you can go to the PDFs, and when you listen to the audiobooks, I don't include the sources, of course, because it would sound really weird. So they have to go to the PDF and read. Everyone has to go and read if they want to find out where the source comes from. So the Star of Bethlehem was a comet with two companions, two little moons or planets, I don't know, seen sometime between the 16 and 15 BC during the census of Caesar Augustus. By the way, Caesar Augustus portrayed himself having ascended as this comet or god that was seen during this time. Around 7 AD, when Jesus or Jeshua was born, see the dates are a little bit like they go from 1 BC to 6 or 7 AD. That's the approximate dates because the calendars were also different. So it was so confusing for chronologists to put it together. When Jesus or Jeshua was born, a comet was seen after the death of King Agrippa. So you know about what time Jesus was born, the death of King Agrippa. Judea was under occupation, and a savior messiah of the bloodline of King David had long been anticipated to liberate them. That was another another thing the messiahs or saviors like Cyrus the Great would do. They would liberate the people on bondage. So they were expecting for this messiah to come and liberate them from their bondage. By a prophecy, there was a prophecy that it was due at that time. The Essenes used Pythagorean astrological knowledge. John the Baptist was a Pythagorean astronomer and prophet who expected the world to come to an end around 30 AD, at the time of Jesus. His message was for the people of Israel to repent and convert through baptism to Judaism in preparation for the coming of the Lord. This coming of the Lord refers to the comet or planet that would cause the catastrophes. John the Baptist recalculated the prophecy of the end times twice. The second time to take place during the Jewish Passover on March 33 AD. The term Passover refers to the passing of a comet above, causing catastrophes, starting with Noah's flood. And Velikovsky goes into this very clear, very detail because his father was a rabbi, so he knew a lot. He could read the books, and that's why he got so much good information from them.
Right.
The apocalypse would take place during the comet's electric interactions with Earth. That's me. That's me saying that. The Gospels make clear Jesus was crucified during the Jewish Passover. This was the reason that the Last Supper took place. When the recalculation of the end of times did not come to pass, and due to the comet's changing orbit, because there's electromagnetic interactions when the comets are coming through the solar system with other planets, and the comets were called the lawless ones. So they can change orbits. They're not coming back at the same time exactly. The crucifixion was awaited until the day of Passover in March 20 of 33 AD. In case the prophecy was correct, Jesus was crucified, and according to the Gnostics, he survived. John the Baptist was beheaded in 36 AD by Herod of Antipas after the crucifixion. The comet caused a 3-hour eclipse of the sun. And a regular eclipse doesn't last 3 hours, by the way. It can only last a few minutes. And earthquakes that destroyed Nicaea and Bithynia, which is Jerusalem and Jordan, also happened at the time. The Gospel of Luke 23:44 describes it. And it was now about the 6th hour, and darkness fell over the whole land until the 9th hour, the sun being obscured. Jesus, like Julius Caesar in 44 BC, was said later by the Christian church. This is very interesting. So Jesus, like Julius Caesar in 44 BC, was said later by the Christian church to have translated or resurrected into a star or comet seen during his crucifixion. A famous depiction of Christ's ascension is the Christ Helios. There's the word Helios, a star or a blazing star, like a comet. That's what they used to call comets, blazing stars. A late 3rd century Roman ceiling mosaic, which is said to show Jesus as the sun god Helios, or called the Sol Invictus because it hasn't been dethroned like the other suns, the other stars, Saturn, Jupiter, and Uranus, riding his chariot in heaven. So Jesus is depicted riding his chariot in heaven. A similar relief depicting the apotheosis, so this is called apotheosis, an ascension of Julius Caesar as Divus Julius, or the god or divine Julius. He's riding to heaven in his chariot. Jesus' transfiguration, like many ascended masters and rulers, occurred at the time of their death or shortly thereafter, and was accompanied by an apparition of a star or comet in the heavens during a catastrophe. So that's the common theme that I have found, and I have examples of all that in Mythos and Cosmogony, which is fascinating. Then the second coming, an Anno Mundi, Anno Domini. I had never heard about this. And I don't know if people know, probably Anno Mundi is the old calendar used for going to it. And the Anno Domini, it's what's called the year of our Lord. That's what when people say year of our Lord. So Anno Domini, year of our Lord, dating system, was devised in the year 525 AD. By what?
No. I wasn't talking to you. I was this.
Something's happening. What am I missing?
No. I'm sorry. No. I was talking to this dumb media player. It's not what I thought. Okay. Sorry.
Back to.
Back to it. Yeah.
This dating system was devised in 525 AD by Dionysius Exiguus, and it is based on the birth of Jesus Christ and his second coming and end of the world. A date linked to the resurrection and the return of Jesus Christ from the chronology that is based on Julius Africanus Sextus that dates Christ's birth to Anno Mundi 5500. The old Anno Mundi calendar began with the creation of the world about 7,500 years ago. It doesn't mean the creation of Earth or the planet. It just means the creation of the lineage of Adam.
Where'd she go?
You lost me?
All right, we lost you. Hold on. Yeah, we lost you. I'm sorry. Okay, you're back now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay.
I thought I lost you.
All right, so it's getting good. You better not lose me.
No, that's what I meant, right? When you were going to name it.
The old Anno Mundi calendar began with the creation of the world about 7,500 years ago with the lineages of Adam and Eve. So it doesn't mean that it was the beginning of the Earth or the planet. That planet was here, of course, and going through many catastrophes. And it probably points to also the catastrophes of the Uranus event, because it couldn't be of the flood of Noah, because that happened in the year after creation, 1656. This 1656 years after the birth of Adam, or Adam and Eve, where like the bloodlines, the lineage was created. And it's not just one Adam and Eve. The humans were here, of course. It was just that specific pair of the bloodline. Okay, otherwise it doesn't make sense. It sounds really crazy and silly. So Noah's flood, I know people are probably thinking, oh, this is really silly, but I'm just passing on the dates and the descriptions of what it says in all the books, all of these chronologies. So before Noah's flood, 1,656 years, Noah's flood occurred around 4000 BC. Now, based on the ancient cosmological, and I'll go more into it and say where this date comes from. Based on the ancient cosmological doctrine, or the secret or occult astronomical knowledge, attributing the origin, beginning, and end of the time to an alignment of all the classical planets, Mars, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn, Mercury, the Sun, and the Moon, which induced Dionysius Exiguus to investigate and calculate a future conjunction of all the planets and to determine the beginning date for Anno Domini, the year of our Lord, 2,000 years before this conjunction. The interpretations of the Gospel and the revelation of St. John, as well as the early medieval rate of precession of the equinoxes, which I think that's kind of interesting, were used for the calculations. The planetary alignment in May 2000, I believe this May 2000 AD, I'm not sure, they don't specify this, was the focus date of the end of the world, according to the calculations of Dionysius Exiguus. Is this the end of the world? Is this why the end of the world is still being expected and the skies observed by infrared telescopes that can spot red or brown dwarf stars? That's me saying this little line at the end. So I think that was wow. Anyways,
Yes.
that's moving on to the next question. How did the Atlanteans come to be on Earth? Could they have been transported from another planet or moon, perhaps by interplanetary forces, sweeping gases, liquids, bacteria, viruses, and perhaps large animals? Do you think it would have required vessels, for example, a spaceship or living organisms, or maybe they were flying in near zero gravity atmospheric bubbles? Is it possible that they crossed the bridge? Were they able to ride flying dragons? Okay, and the answer is, I suppose the Atlanteans inhabited a planet or planets and moons that were close by, orbiting either Neptune, Uranus, or Saturn. And this is, of course, if that's where they came from, right? Considering that's maybe where they came from. They must have had some sort of spaceship and possibly used the sheaths of the Birkeland currents like electric highways between the planets, which would have been a very efficient and fast way to travel through space. They were known to mine a lot of golds and other, a lot of gold, not golds, a lot of gold and other metals since they arrived. So probably they were using it for space travel. Please also check out Greg's video on the Nephilim. You did a video on the Nephilim, so they can read about that. And in astrology, Uranus is a higher octave of Mercury, which could mean it travels on the same current sheath as Mercury. I don't know, that's just a question, and I thought that was an interesting information there.
Tess, I thought it was very interesting that Velikovsky actually wrote about the Nephilim.
Oh yeah, and about giants.
But he did it in 41, and he said he was going to stop because he knew he wouldn't be taken seriously.
Yeah, and then the UFOs of the 50s and 40s during the Second World War.
Yeah.
Were being talked
so he
about.
was way ahead of that too.
Yeah. And he said, okay, maybe I won't sound like total nutcase, so I won't put it out there. Anyways, and yes, and all of this is on the books that he was reading, so he didn't make it up. He was just passing on the information that was written in these ancient texts. Okay.
Yeah, but how sad is it that a guy can't dedicate his studies 100%? He has to hold back, you know?
Yeah.
Shouldn't be that way. But go ahead.
No, we
Sorry.
shouldn't. Yeah. Well, that's, at least we're talking about him. We're honoring his all his work.
Yes.
We're trying to support and find the sources and anyways, carry the torch. Okay, so question. Oh, and by the way, I'm trying to fill the gaps from, he was going to write a book about the last millennium until Christ's birth that probably was going to talk about more comets and more catastrophes, but he didn't write it for some reason. I guess, I don't know, he didn't have time or whatever. So I thought I would go and look, and I found some interesting information that I've been putting on in my books.
Oh, we're all glad you did. Yes.
Thank you.
We're all intrigued.
Excellent. Now, the next question, I don't really know a lot about, so I'm just going to say what I think, kind of like just what I really think from my other research, and it's going to be very short answers, so I'm sorry about that, but maybe we can do something like about this later on. Some more into depth. It's about Tartaria. So they want to know more information on Tartaria. And it seems like they just want to know more about it. So what I know is that it occupied parts of Russia, Turkey, and China, and I might be, missing some places. So it was like a very big area. And this is before the 1800s AD. And that was taken over, or up until that time, that was occupied and taken over by the Christian Empire. What else is new? They took over like most of the world. The Slavic people they were forcefully Christianized since around 900 AD, and their history erased. That's what I know. And, it's just like what the history of the world, unfortunately, it's between groups of people, between tribes that rule the planet. It just seems to be the same old story. And it's very sad that it just keeps repeating itself. And now I go into chronology of events. So,
nice, good.
Yeah. So Anno Mundi. So this is should I say first what do I get this from, or say that the chronology of events, and then where I get this from?
Save time for the Hittites, because that's my question. But go ahead.
Yes. Okay. The chronology of events. Anno Mundi. The Elohim. They come to Earth, or they appear on the books and the text around 7,500 years ago, or 5,860 BC. This would equal the year 0 of the Anunnaki when they arrived due to the Uranus causing catastrophes in their planet. I don't know, but the king's list begins then. So you can give you a clue. Anno Mundi 01, Adam is born, which equals to around 5,500 BC, which equals 40 SARS when the Igigi rebel and the first Adam is created, because the Igigis were the ones doing the work, the hard labor, allegedly. And they said, we don't want to do this anymore, we're tired. And so the Adam, or the workforce, was trained and devised from the earthlings. So that's the timeline. AM, Anno Mundi, I'll say AM, which is Anno Mundi, 622, and Enoch is born, which is the year 4,878 BC. And this is 102nd Sar when Enkime, or Enoch, is born. That's what they call Enmenduranki. That's the Sumerian word for Enoch, his equivalent. And that's where the story seems to come from. People can go and read about all this Enoch. AM 987, Enoch's floods take place. That's 5,175 years ago, during the 80 Sar of Uranus. During the 80 Sar of the Sumerians, Uranus causes catastrophes on Earth. The expulsion from the Garden of Eden occurs at this time, when the seasons began, night and day, for the first time, and the moon appeared, or was captured by Earth. Anno Mundi 1656. And all of this is in the book, so PDF, so people don't have to try to figure all this out. They can go and read it in there. Anno Mundi 1656, Noah's flood. And this is about 4,292 BC, or 5,844 years ago. End of Saturn's reign as it goes nova happened during this time. And it was the 120 Sar when the king's list ended. And that's the pre-flood and the after-flood kings list. So that's where I take those SARS counts. Therefore, if there was a golden age, this is very interesting. Therefore, if there was a golden age of Uranus before Enoch's flood, it must have lasted at least 987 years from the birth of Adam to the year 01, or the year 01 AM, the birth of Adam, to the first flood of Enoch, which took place when Enoch died in the year Anno Mundi 987. Enoch was born in the year Anno Mundi 622, and he died when he was 365 years old. So adding 622 plus 365 equals 987. That's how I came up with that number. Enoch's flood and catastrophes created the seasons, night and day, measurable time, the ability to look at the stars and do astronomy observations, and the exit from the plasma sheath from the red dwarf. If Saturn was castrated and went nova during the second flood, that of Noah's time, the second flood, which took place in Anno Mundi 1656, that means that Saturn's reign, or time Earth was captured by Saturn, since Saturn dethroned Uranus, lasted about 669 years. That's not very long. 1656. That's the Anno Mundi year when Noah's flood and Saturn's nova takes place. And then you deduct 987, which is the year of the Earth's capture by Saturn and the first flood when Uranus went nova and was deposed by Saturn, equals 669 years. So I just did the math. Then, after Floa's node, after the flood, which was around 4000 BC, this is interesting, the Nippurian calendar year 01 began, which is the calendar used by the Jews. And it started in the year 3760 BC, which points to, there were some centuries there missing of counting time because the earth was destroyed, people were dead, and they were, most people were dead. The survivors were trying to put things back together. And then the Nippurian calendar begins at this time in the city of Nippur, of course, in Sumeria. Anno Mundi 1744, which is 4202 BC, or Anno Mundi 1942, which is 3916 BC. There's two different dates given by chronologers. The Tower of Babel, Mercury, confusion, the Mercury event, confusion of languages and dispersion of mankind occurs. The year 2800 BC. I don't know what Anno Mundi this is, but I know that I read from the Babylonian history that new constellations appeared and were used for navigation in Babylon. And think about this. If new constellations appeared, that means that the Earth axis and place in space changed, because otherwise, why would new constellations appear, right? Think about that. Then, Anno Mundi 1918. And this is about 2030 BC. The calendar changed after Jupiter's interactions with Earth. Now, Jupiter's position in the sky changed in heaven as it was seen to rise in the opposite direction. Because why did this happen? Well, we must have left it behind on our way to being captured by the sun. So we used to be, behind Jupiter, and we came by Jupiter. We got thunderbolts and lightning and floods, and then we kept going. So Jupiter changed the place, the position of rising. That's what I can think of. Then Anno Mundi, and this is also described in the Dendera calendar, which I already talked about in Egypt, in the Temple of Hathor. Anno Mundi 2118, which is 2091 BC. Comets seen Abraham with people migrate to Egypt due to famine. So this is a time frame, 2091 BC. Anno Mundi, 2128, which equals 1820 BC. A few years after Abraham's death, another comet appeared. Great mutations occurred. Famine of Isaac's days, Python's conflagration occurred. That was the destruction by fire of the planet Python that drove the chariot of Apollo too close to the earth, and that's when this happened. Anno Mundi, 2230, which equals 1806 BC. A terrible coiling comet appeared. It was by the king of Egypt, then living, called by the name of Typhoon. So the name of the king was called Typhoon, which was also the name given to the comet. During Joseph's time of Egypt, the comet known as Pillar of Smoke. In Anno Mundi 2448, or approximately 1500 BC, here's goodies. The flood of Ogyges in the days of Joshua, which per Noah Webster, which is one of the chronologers I use, the historians, was calculated from a comet, I'll read it later on, that appeared 3 times afterwards, and he took the count backwards, and he calculated 1757 BC. But I think that's wrong, and I'll tell you the correct timing. It is said that the planet Venus changed her color, size, and figure during the flood of Ogyges. Isn't that amazing? An account is preserved in tradition of a phenomenon of the same nature during the approach of the same star, Venus. He's talking about Venus. In a subsequent revolution, Gibbon in the chapter, so Venus came twice, within 50 or 52 years, came twice towards Earth and caused catastrophes. Gibbon in the chapter above cited, cleanly, as I have already remarked, and this is Noah Webster talking about this, mentions a similar phenomenon. This is really interesting. About the time the same comet appeared, soon after the death of Julius Caesar. The temple of the comet star, 8-pointed star of Venus that we talked about, remember? He's saying that this is the same comet. Anyways, the historians say that's what they calculate, or the astronomers.
Yes.
Now, the year AM, Anno Mundi, 2429, which is about 1519 BC. The Python conflagration, as per Calvisius, which is another historian, is calculated to have occurred. Anno Mundi 2432, or 1516 BC. That's just a couple of years from Python's conflagration. That's when the flood of Deucalion occurred, according to Calvisius in Opus Chronologicum, 1629, written in 1629. So the flood of Ogyges occurred during the Venus events. So it must have been just maybe, so there were 2 approaches, probably in the first approach, and I'll give another time a little bit down here, I think, that's when I have it. So the first approach, the Ogyges flood happened. And in the second approach, the Deucalion flood occurred. Then Anno Mundi, 2453, which is 1495 BC, the Exodus comet, the comet seen during the Exodus, which is Venus, is seen in the year the children of Israel were delivered from Egypt, from the bondage of Egypt. And this is according to Calvisius in Opus Chronologicum, written in 1629, 1495 BC. Then Anno Mundi 2770, which is circa 1000 BC. A formidable comet was seen, and the destruction of Troy took place. Likewise, the war of the Amazons with the Thebans was near this time. So the historians didn't think that Troy was fiction. They all talk about it, even Isaac Newton. in his chronologies, which I'll talk about later in a little bit when I'm done. I'll say all the chronologies where I take this information from. Anno Mundi 2795, around 1153 BC. And I might be wrong with these BCs because some of them, I put them there. They were not given with the BC date. So if I make a mistake, please feel free to correct me and we'll fix it. Was a comet seen in the days of Samson. So Samson and Delilah are also true, and allegedly. And he killed the Philistine lords. And during the catastrophe, masses of people died in the temple while sacrificing to their god Dagon. In Anno Mundi 3458, circa 553 BC, so this is 553 BC, a comet crooked like a horn in the days of Anaxagoras and Democritus, who are the most ancient writers that gives any historical account about comets, occurred. In Anno Mundi 3518, circa 493 BC, correction, 493 BC, or as others compute the age of the world, 3537, because some people computed differently, there was seen a fearful comet for 75 days. Together, Pliny, Plutarch, Aristotle, and other ancient writers speak of this comet. Great commotions attending this comet occurred, and the Peloponnesian War that lasted 27 years, and it was a civil war among the Greeks, occurred, and earthquakes and pestilence that accompanied this comet also killed most of the population in Greece. In Anno Mundi 3537, or as others compute, age of the world 3553, earthquakes, deluge in Achaia, it's a city in Greece, I guess, wherein multitudes perished. Helis and Buris, two famous cities, were lost in the sea. It was about this time that Nehemiah built up the walls in Jerusalem. Anno Mundi 3594, a bearded comet appeared. Afterwards appeared like a spear. So the bearded comet appeared like a spear. It's like a rhyme. Alexander the Great was born the same day in 360 BC, and a new calendar began. In 3729, 3754, 3789, more comets in Anno Mundi. I'm just giving like a little bit of these comets. In 3789, King Seleucus was poisoned. I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name, so I'm sorry about that. 44 BC, comet was seen, possibly Venus. Julius Caesar's temple of the eight-pointed star, which represents Venus, was built, and he had his apotheosis, converting into or ascending into this star. And a new calendar began, the Julian calendar. And so, you know, there seems to be a lot of comets that occurred, great big comets, not just little ones, but big ones. They call them the great big comets, or comets that cause a lot of catastrophes, linked to new calendars. And so I suppose, must be, because something happens to the orbit or the axis of the Earth. And it doesn't have to be a total destruction of the planet at all, obviously, because all these calendars have been created, and the Earth, I mean, and people are still alive, even though a lot of them, you know, there's a lot of catastrophes, but still, it's not a total disaster. Anyway, so in 16 to 15 BC, the Star of Bethlehem, which was a comet, it's recorded in history by historians, with two companions, was seen during the census of Augustus Caesar. He declared himself a god and portrayed himself as ascended as the comet god, as I mentioned before. In Anno Mundi 5500, Jesus Christ is born, which equals the year 01 BC, which really his birth is supposed to be between 6 and 7 AD, but whatever. A comet was seen after the death of Agrippa. The Pythagorean astronomers expected an apocalypse, and John the Baptist and Jesus began their mission as messiahs, saviors, and converting souls, you know, to prepare. And there's more comets recorded in the ebooks if people want to go and see what, and then linked to either disaster or wars or interesting historical accounts, especially AD. There's a lot of comets. Cosmic timeline. So here you go. They can go to Cosmic Timeline and page 97 of Mythos and Cosmogony and see the whole explanation again. So they don't go, oh my God, I have to write this down. Don't worry about it. Just take your time, relax. So my work is based on ancient worlds, pre and after flood kings lists, and on other chronologers and ancient historians that recorded catastrophes caused by comets or planetary close approaches since the creation of the world, known as Anno Mundi. See page 22 in Mythos and Cosmogony for more information. And let me just take a sip of my tea here.
You're doing wonderful.
Well, I know that we kept people waiting, so I'm trying to go really fast.
Yeah. No,
thanks, everyone. You're awesome for waiting.
Yes.
And yeah, yay, hooray for everyone.
You've
Patience pays off. Anyways, okay, so.
I'm loving
it. Increase Mather and John Sherman. I take the information from this Cosmetographia, which was written circa 1683. It's a historical description and account of all the comets which have appeared from the beginning of the world until the year 1683, Anno Mundi, of comets recorded and related catastrophes, including names of kings and rulers that were alive during the times of the catastrophes. Increased Mather also gives the approximate dates of the comets since Noah's flood, during the destruction of the Tower of Babel, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, the Exodus in Anno Mundi chronology. So he uses the AM chronology, which is what they used to use really before. Theatrum Cometicum is another book, another historian, by Stanislaw Lubienek from the 1680s. That was when he wrote it. He also has a chronological chart using Anno Mundi, dating of AC after creation. That's another date that they use, which I think is the same. They call it after creation, AC. The Septuagint, the Masoretic, and which he compares the three timelines of events. So he does a comparison because they vary a little bit. They're not all the same. Of biblical events, starting from Adam to Enosh, is 435 years. After the flood, Arphaxad, born in 2397 AC. Terah is born in 3277 AC, or 3258 AC. Creation to Jesus' birth is 5500, as mentioned above, or the year 01 BC. The Septuagint says 5553 years. The Masoretic, 4173 years. Creation to Rome, that's 5523 years. The Septuagint says 4143 years. The creation to Joseph's death, 3563 or 1806 BC. Septuagint, 3748 years. The Masoretic, 2228 years. Flood to Abraham, when he left Haran, 1015 years. The Septuagint, 1207 years. And I don't know if this is getting boring for people, but he goes through the timelines of the Exodus to Cyrus, and covenant, from the covenant to King David, from Saul to Zedekiah, from the period to the Judges, Daniel to the crucifixion. And that's where he ends, which is interesting because when he starts to use AD, he calls them solar years. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. Solar years. Isn't that interesting? So what were the years before that? They were not solar years. Anyways, his book is an account and description, of all the comets which have been observed since Noah's flood, being in number 415, including a chronological chart of events from Noah's flood, destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham, Exodus and Moses, building of Solomon's temple, to Cyrus the Great, freeing the Jews from bondage in Babylon. Then another book and source is Samuel Danforth. His book describes the comets of the past and specifically the bearded Great Comet of 1664 and accompanying catastrophes. Sir Isaac Newton is another source. The Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms Amended, published after his death, where he gives the chronologies of events like the destruction of Troy, the Exodus, etc. And he explains that this is very important. He explains that the ancients had a lunar calendar from the 5th to the 25th Egyptian dynasty, or Thebes, Thebes, I don't know, that's the same as Thebes, when the solar year was calculated, and the 25th dynasty. That's until they were able to calculate the solar year, because obviously the sun was too far to be calculated.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? I mean, this kind of makes sense, because
Right.
that's how late Earth acquired a stable orbit around the sun. Same as Mars, Venus, and Mercury. And then everything makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
Samuel Noah Webster. He's really amazing. He's the man who wrote the dictionary, but no one knows about his other books that talk about all the catastrophes related to comets, all the comet sightings in history, in historic times, from the deluge, starting from the deluge. And he studied the electric universe. Well, he said that the universe was electric in the 1780s. Did you know that?
Wow, that's even before Edgar Allan Poe, because
Yes,
yeah, he
Samuel,
said
you
so
got to
much
check
about
his book. And I have all the parts where he talks about the electric universe and the suns and planets must be electric, in my Mythos and Cosmogony. So people really have to make an effort and go and at least browse for the words that are interesting to them. You don't have to read the whole thing. That's what I do. You know, there's a lot of information. Just go and search for the stuff that you want to know about.
Yeah.
So he, in 1780, I think it's circa 1780. I might be wrong with the date, but it's around that time. And they can go to the page 134 of Mythos and Cosmogony. Here's the page. I'm giving it to them so it's easy. And he has treatises on comets recorded and their accompanying plagues and catastrophes. He also discusses the electric universe, the suns and the planets being electric. Anno Mundi. Yeah, that's very, very good.
Yes. Sorry.
Anno Mundi Chronology. Other dates of creation of the world. Page 117 from Mythos and Cosmogony. They can read about this. By Julius Sextus Africanus. The Hebrew Septuagint and the Masoretic and Talmud texts. Then there is another source from the correct interpretation of the Babylonian Shar or Sar, which is a half of Asaros. Asaros is singular for Saroi. And one Saroi is based on a month and lunar cycles.
Okay.
One Saros equals, don't worry, you'll get it. I know it sounds like, what? That's a nightmare, but I did the math for you, so you don't have to get a headache. One Saros equals 222 lunar months, which equals 18 years and 6 months. So what you do is you divide 222 by 12, because 1 year has 12 months, right?
Yeah.
And you get, so one shar equals about 9 years, because you would get 18, but remember the shar is half of a saru. And this guy gives you the translation for a saru. Anyways, so they can look on page 98 of Mythos and Cosmogony for that. And then all the king's list of the Babylonians make sense. They're not crazy 400,000 years long, you know, because that's just like a stretch. I'm sorry, that's just like pulling it too long. That doesn't make sense. The Egyptian, I mean, it's bad enough that people say that you lived up to 2,000 years or 1,000 years before the deluge, right? Or even before Abraham. But even up to Abraham, people lived, if you look at their lifespans, which is really amazing, then you can see how they shrink, shorter and shorter and shorter, which is with each catastrophe. So up to Abraham, people lived quite long lives, and I was obviously the different atmosphere and the red dwarf and the body and everything was just different. And then little by little, man's size shrunk. And I think that's also what they mean by the yugas, denigrating and going downwards because just things went down south.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
didn't
It
get
seemed
better.
to
They
have.
got worse. Yeah, we've had a very hard time.
Yeah.
And the Egyptian historian Manetho wrote of the ancient Egyptians counting time in months rather than years, quoting him. The year I take, however, to be a lunar one, consisting, that is, of 30 days. What we now call a month, the Egyptians used formerly to style a year. End of quote. So what they call a year, it was really a month. And then the numbers get exactly the same as the Sumerian. That everything matches to the Masoretic and the Septuagint and the Eve and Adam timeline. Everything fits
Yeah.
perfectly.
Yes.
Then the Egyptians also used the helical rising of Sirius, as I mentioned, called the Sothic cycle. Now, Sirius travels on the same Birkeland current as the Earth. That's why it remains stationary relative to the precession of the equinoxes. And you got to check out Jim Wenninger's and Eugene Bagoshov's work and videos on this subject because they're talking about it. Finally, someone's talking about this. So
Good.
that's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, that would explain why they use Sirius, because it was moving like the Earth and the solar system, so it didn't keep changing like the precession of the equinoxes. Anyways. Right. Now, this is very important. Uranus was rediscovered. A lot of people were saying, oh, but Uranus was only discovered in the 1700s by modern astronomers. So it couldn't have been known by the ancient Sumerians, the Greeks, and the Hindu historians, right?
Right.
Well, this is what I can say about this. The Sumerian god An, father of all the other gods, besides being called Heavenly Father or Heaven, was equal to the planet Uranus, and was represented by the four-pointed star with waves. It's a four-pointed star with waves. What is that? That's a star, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And they call it the eight-pointed star because it looks almost like 8 points. But if you look at closely, it's not 8 points. It's 4 points, and then it has waves like waves on each, 4 waves between each point. And I have it on my website, so people can go and look at the mythos images, and they can click on that, then they can see it, and they can see the links to where I got this from.
Okay.
And this is where the asterisk. Now he also has a symbol like an asterisk.
Okay.
It's like eight. Eight's a little. It's like your what do you call it? The star sign on your keyboard and on your phone. That's where that comes from. Yes.
Yeah.
And asterisk comes from the word aster, and aster means star. And I don't know if people know this, but this is quite.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, the Hittite epic of creation speaks of An as Uranus also, reigning in heaven together with Kumarbi, Saturn, and Alalu, which could be also Saturn and Neptune. In the Sumerian Enuma Elish, the Kumarbi could be Saturn, Alalu could be Neptune. In the Sumerian Enuma Elish, Enlil, or Jupiter, carried away Ki, Earth, from Ouranos, which means it captured Earth from Uranus. Just like Hesiod, speaking of the separation of Ouranos from Gaia by Zeus. So we go like, wait a minute, we thought it was Saturn, right? That did this. But what I'm thinking that maybe this is referring to is that, because you have to think about that the whole solar system was going through chaos, okay? It wasn't just one planet. It was everything was just, the Birkeland currents were lit up and all the planets were excited. They were being captured and everything was just crossing orbits, getting, from one planet to the other, moons destroyed, being sapped by solar flares, and just total chaos, which is the war of the Titans. And so what I think these people are trying to say, these two, is that Zeus might have first gotten just going crazy, like lit up, starting sending flares, and that caused Saturn to start flaring as well, and then it caused Uranus to go nova. So that's where maybe this is coming from, but I don't know. This is just an idea. Then the pre-flood rulers of Egypt, what I'll just say very little. I was mentioning this earlier. Diodorus was told by the Egyptians. So Diodorus went in the year during the 180th Olympiad. He went to Egypt and he talked to the priests, high priests, and to people that would know about the history, and wrote down the history that he could, everything that he could about them. So he says, they say and they tell me something, and others say. That's how he puts it down, right? Because he went and wrote this account. So Diodorus was told by the Egyptians that before the flood of Noah, and all this must have taken place after the first flood of Uranus, because check this out. By the time the son of Cronus, Osiris, was the ruler, there were 3 seasons. This is before the flood of Noah. There were 3 seasons: spring, summer, and there was no fall. So it was spring, summer, and winter. And Osiris introduced agriculture and harvest. After cannibalism existed, Isis introduced the laws. She put the laws and she says, no man can change them. I say what goes on and nobody can touch them. Hermes introduced religion. Yeah, she was real nice. Hermes introduced religion and astronomy and music. So religion, astronomy. So they were observing the stars before Noah's flood. Isn't this interesting?
Yeah.
Hephaestus, because this is the list of the gods that ruled before the flood. And then there's another list that he gives after the flood that starts with Menes.
Okay.
So Hephaestus was the first to rule. Then Helios, then Cronus. Now, some people say that Helios ruled first, but either was Hephaestus, Helios, or Cronus, or Helios and Cronus. Then Osiris and Isis, or Jupiter and Hera. Some say Jupiter and Hera are the ones that became the important ones. Osiris is also represented as the sky spangled with the stars. I think that's really interesting. Osiris is represented almost like the goddess Nut, or, spangled with stars. As for Isis, she was represented and worshipped as the horned moon, or cow, or the sacred cow. Yeah. So she appeared, she with Osiris were the first ones, which also matches the story of the moon being acquired after the Uranus flood. Okay? Because Osiris, who allegedly was also the son, or Sirius, Sirius, if you take the O from his name, you have Sirius or Sirius. So he was also called Sirius, which I think is really interesting. As for Isis, she was represented, I said, like the horned moon. Some of them give the story that at the first, gods and heroes, which are half human, half gods, the heroes, ruled Egypt for a little less than 8,000 years. But again, if we take these 8,000 years and we calculate it correctly, we know that there were months. Now we know the secret code to decoding this. It's 18,000 divided by 12 makes 1,500 years. And guess what? That matches the other timelines and Adam and Eve and the creation. So that's very cool. Then the last of the gods to rule being Horus, the son of Isis, before the flood. And that mortals have been kings over their country for a little less than 5,000 years, down to the 180th Olympiad, the time when we visited Egypt, and the king was Ptolemy, who took the name of the new Dionysius. Then, after the flood, the first ruler was Menes. And Menes wasn't very popular because allegedly he inscribed a curse in hieroglyphs in the temple of Zeus. And I have a feeling that this was because maybe Zeus was causing problems or something like that, but I'm not sure. Like the planet? I don't know, could have. Okay, so the Heavenly Father, or heaven sky, is the English equivalent for the Roman god Caelus. And his Greek word is Ouranos, and which is translated as Uranus. So they're all the same people. It's not only called heaven, okay? It's all called all those names. Caelus, for heaven, is just the Roman name. Anyways, Uranus was the father of the Titans in the Titanomachy, or War of the Titans, and Hesiod's and in Hesios' theogony. After 10 years of battle, Zeus won the male titans, which were Caelus or Uranus, Saturn or Kronos, Neptune or Poseidon, and Pluto or Hades, were banished to Tartarus, which means the fringes of the solar system. And Earth moved, Earth moved forward. So of course these planets were left behind. They were bigger, they were not captured, they were not dragged into the inside of the solar system, inner solar system, like Venus, Mars, Mercury, and Earth, which makes sense. So that's how they perceived it. The planets were sent to Tartarus, but no, Earth actually moved forward. And yeah, maybe they moved further back or whatever, they were trying to balance after going nova and going sideways, and Uranus, got all messed up, and
I'm
Neptune.
picturing in the beginning, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt,
No,
but
go ahead. I can
I
drink
wanted
some.
to blurt it out before I forgot it.
Mhm.
uh, I picture one red dwarf coming in with two brown dwarfs. I don't know why I picture that, but and I think that one thing about the Hittites I found so
Mhm.
interesting, that
Indeed.
Neptune
Yeah.
is the king of heaven. That that rings a bell with me, you know.
Well, those are clues. All of those are clues. They don't say it, they don't spell it because they don't spell it out because the masses were not supposed to know, but it was like done in a poetical way in case, somebody got a hold of the books. They're
Yes,
not
yes.
supposed to know the whole
Now,
truth.
who were the Hittites? Because I do not know. I'm going to have to research them.
The Hittites, were they? I don't know exactly, but yeah,
Yeah,
just
I'll
it's
find it.
just different tribes and maybe a little
Yeah,
different timeline,
I
but
see.
they are not too far from the Sumerians.
You
Not
know
too
what's
far.
interesting? Not
Mm,
to get off the subject, but just making one brief, interesting statement.
sure.
I answered a comment uh, earlier today, and someone was talking about the Scythians and the Thracians. Well,
Hmm.
I didn't even know that those peoples existed until 2 or 3 years ago. It really
Hmm.
has, it never really was known. I never remember hearing
Right.
about it in school.
Right.
So more and more does come out as time goes on. You
Yes. And
know,
I have. If you go to the actually, well, if you go to actually, your question might be answered in the book in Mythos and Cosmogony. If
yeah,
you go to the genealogy of the gods.
I'm going to. Yeah,
Just
I'll
go
go there.
there and check out, because there's a lot of information there that I have gathered for
Yeah, I'm
people to
sorry.
look
I
at.
didn't mean to offset
No,
your.
that's fine.
I
That's
just
good, actually.
needed
That's
to get
good.
that out. Yeah.
Yeah. And anyway, so I'll continue really quickly.
Okay. Okay.
How can you castrate? Okay, this is another point. How can you castrate empty space from planets and still it's planets
Right.
if it's not a star?
Exactly.
And the same
Can't.
process happened to Saturn caused by Jupiter. If Uranus wasn't like Saturn, it would have been repeated, the same story. So I'm sorry, but it's got to be a star.
Yeah.
It has to be.
Right.
If you listen to these stories and look at the sign, the symbols of Anu. If Okay, so it goes nova and was castrated with an adamantine sickle or a plasma discharge or solar flare of Saturn. That's how it got dethroned, and have its planets captured by Saturn. Same process. Okay, it was repeated by Jupiter and Saturn later on. Also, Earth's moon Aphrodite was a satellite of Uranus, so captured at the time of Uranus, during Uranus went nova, created from the severed testicles of Uranus. How can you create a moon from empty space, right? Because
Right.
the stars are really far. I mean, he couldn't be all the stars. He couldn't be all the stars. That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So, anyways, in the Orphic myth, moving a little bit forward, in the Orphic myth of creation of the solar system, Jupiter sent Saturn. Okay, we talked about this. Jupiter sent Saturn after being deposed, bonded in chains. That's when he went nova. He got his rings after going nova to the Janiculum in Tartarus, which were the new domains of Janus Uranus after being deposed. So where is Saturn now? It's by Uranus, right? And Neptune. So they have to be talking about those planets. Anyways, Uranus was forgotten when it was left behind, far away from Earth's view. As I said, Earth was captured by Saturn, then by Jupiter, and finally by the Sun. It moved into the inner solar system, and Uranus was left behind and forgotten. What other planet, if not Neptune or Uranus? Uranus is closer to Saturn. Has to be Janus or Uranus next to the planets Saturn, Kronos. That's why they named it Uranus. Also, when they rediscover it because it was left too far to be important, you know. And it's still, at least maybe Jupiter and Uranus were a little bit more visible, but I think Uranus was just too far and too small after going nova. And that's why they named it Uranus. First they thought it was a star when they discovered it. Did you know that? They thought they had discovered a comet or a star, and then they figured out it was a planet. And then they wanted to name it something different, like the name of a king, by the astronomer who found it. But then another French, I think it was another French guy, he came out and said, no, according to the myths, this is the correct planet, so we should name it Uranus. And it's also green, like the Hindu and the Hindus describe the planet Uranus, which people can go and check the photo in the images and get the link and the information. And the last thing that I'm going to say, I'm trying to go really fast so we can answer more questions or go into comments, about the gods and demigods being historic characters, as well as representing the stars and planets of the solar system. And many people have been asking, well, how come the mythological stories are different and they vary and they're not the same, but then they talk about the archetypes and they're kind of confused. So I want to answer about this, that the number of antediluvian rulers or patriarchs seems to add 10 to 10, up to 10 rulers worldwide, in different countries, of course. China and India and the Mexican, the pre-Hispanic stories, and the Greek and the Sumerian and the Hittites and all of those. The Sumerian kings, and the Egyptians, of course, the Sumerian kings listed after the floods were Gilgamesh and Tammuz, or called Adonis by the Greek. Gilgamesh became the hero of the Babylonian epic poem, which bears his name. Everyone knows about Gilgamesh, and which also contains an account of the flood. Until recently, these kings' lists and the names of them were thought to be purely fiction. But in 1930, Sir Leonard Woolley, while excavating a building at Ur, which is Sumeria, and might be Nippur, or Nibiru, Nibur. I mean, there's a lot of coincidences there with the name. On the Ubaid level, which is layers down underneath the clay and mud, found the royal tombs of kings and Queen Puabi, which were 4,500 years ago that were buried in the royal tombs. During the first dynasty of Ur, her body was dug up at some point in the 1920s or 1930s, and it was determined that she was a goddess because she had the name Nin. In Sumerian means goddess. Nin Banda, Nin Igula, Nin Puabi. Her father, that's her different names. Her father was Lugal Banda. Her brother was Gilgamesh, and her spouse was Mes Anepada. Woolley also found an inscription indicating that the structure had been erected by the son of the founder of the first dynasty of Ur, who was Gilgamesh himself. So since the 1840s was regarded as fiction, remember the ancients of all the world used to believe that their gods were real. Of course, they were the planets. They represented and controlled the planets and the stars and the forces of nature, because that's what they were told. But since the 1840s, that's when they changed all these and they made it all into fiction. And we've lived, of course, in these last centuries. We think of all these stories as silly, just myths and not true. So Gilgamesh too has been found to be a real person. Just an example, there's many others. The rulers of earth, since the birth of Adam and Eve, were called lords until the Greeks referred to them as gods. The Old Testament, as well as all the world's kings list, were written specifically to keep a written record of the bloodlines of the lords, of the tribes. They had different tribes So of course they would have different stories, because let's say you and your family, your brothers, and spread out, and you go rule the world, and you have your wives, and you have your children, and you have your areas, and then all this stuff happens in the skies, and you come up with a story that you're going to write down and tell and give people as an explanation why that happened, and for the future generations also to know, to keep as record. And so besides the genealogical records, which were very important to these people, to these bloodlines, they wrote the stories of creation and the stories of myth, the myth of creation. Anyways, so they would be a little different, because your brother would come up with a little story, and he had a different wife than yours, right? Your wife and your children wouldn't be the same. They would be different, but you're related. You're related. You're like from the same tribe. And then as your children have children, the tribes start getting bigger. You know, the trees start spreading out the branches, and those people just fought with each other constantly. They couldn't get along. Anyways, so they created their own stories, and that's why they are a little bit different. But they had sort of like the formulas they had to, they worked really well, so they kept going with the stories. And that's why in Greece you don't have the same gods that you had in the Sumerian pantheon. You have new gods, because they were the children and the demigods that came along thousands of years later, and so on, all the way to the kings. And I'll get into this a little down here. It's really interesting. So anyways, so they created the punishment idea of that the masses, if the masses were disobedient or disloyal to their ruler, then there would be a catastrophe and they would be all killed. So people better behave and be good and listen and obey the ruler. Then you just have to look at history of the royalty in the last 500 years. And from there you can go back in time and see the same formulas and behaviors and ways of functioning that they have used for millennia. And it's all been the same. And they kept using it. And then you can go back and say, oh, well, this makes sense. So that's obviously what they were doing. And that's where the whole scepter, the crown, the rings, the little ball with a cross on top that they hold of the royals, that's the cape with the stars or whatever. That's all where it comes from. It stems from very, 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 very long ago, 7,000 years ago or so. So throughout the last 7,500 or so years of civilization, the patriarchs, known as patriarchs, kings and high priests, have stated their royal descent from the gods, mostly a male patriarchal Y chromosome system or line of the descendants, passing the power, except for the empty DNA of some goddesses, for example, Lilith and Inanna, which are actually the lines of the Scottish and the Jewish royal bloodlines. And that's why the mother's line is so important compared to the Christians or other bloodlines that don't have that in there, you see? So that kind of makes sense why the church was attacking the female and the goddess and all that.
Absolutely.
But you can go and read all about this in my book. It's really, really interesting. Then, and besides the genealogist of the royals of the Scottish lines, royal lines in Scotland, called Lawrence Gardner, Sir Lawrence Gardner, states that their origins go as far back as the Sumerian gods Anu, Enlil, Enki actually. Enki is his line. But he says that just like it's no big deal. It's like, yeah, that's where we come from and blah, blah, blah. And he goes through all the lines and the fighting between the Christians and the Scottish bloodlines, which is really fascinating. We have an example of these as late as the 17th century AD. When King Louis, this is very cool, when King Louis XIV of France declared himself as a god and called apotheosis, that's when they become a god, apotheosis. When in 1664, 1665, 1666, and 1668, there was comets seen constantly for 4 years and causing problems and pestilence, including Halley's comet. They caused famines, earthquakes, storms, and yeah, death from pestilence. The end of the world was expected, and the reformation and appearance of a Messiah, Sabbatai Sevi, occurred during this time due to all these comets appearing. King Louis XIV portrayed himself as the divine descendant of the god star Jupiter of Enlil's lineage, just like Alexander the Great did in 323 BC during another appearance of a comet, which also caused a calendar change. King Louis called himself the Sun King, an absolute ruler. He declared, I am Jupiter and I am the sun. And I don't know if people know this, but it's quite interesting. And there's a documentary that I watched, and that's why I know this. It's Lucy Worsley, The Real Versailles. And I love history documentaries. I love to watch about the royalty, even though they screw up people. I think it's really fascinating. And she talked about this, and I was like, oh my gosh, when I read more about the comets, and there was another thing, and yeah, he built Versailles as a new Heliopolis, in which his court survived inside its walls during the many pestilences and brought on by a series of comets. So Lucy Wolsey also talks about this, and she says he trapped the royals, the court. The court was trapped in the castle. They couldn't go out. They couldn't go out to the bathroom. The smell was disgusting. I mean, it was terrible. People wouldn't take showers. Everything stunk. It was terrible, but it was because of the plagues. People couldn't take a shower, or not a shower. There were not showers. They couldn't bathe because the water was contaminated, and there was viruses in the water and toxins or some things that would kill people, like cause the plagues. And that's why they were locked in there. They were not trapped. They were trying to survive, away from everyone else. Even one day had to be added to the Julian and Gregorian calendars on May 9th, 1664, due to the orbital changes caused by the comet's electromagnetic influence. Yeah, there was a calendar adjustment in 1664. Historically, calendar adjustments are needed and linked to the approach of large comets. There are always comets linked to the calendar changes. The great comets of 1664 also caused the great red spot of Jupiter. So that's why King Louis XIV said, I am Jupiter. Jupiter started acting up and displaying, and giant flares coming out, and the red spot appeared. In 1664, Robert Hooke saw the appearance of the giant red spot in Jupiter, probably caused by an electric interaction with the comet or comets, just like it happened with Comet Shoemaker. Yeah, trumpets also were used to resemble the sounds of the thunderbolts, by the way, but that's when they were like really big thunderbolts. And they're used in the courts of the kings, and horns by the high priests and the shamans. They use this because it resembles the sounds of the plasma coming down into Earth, and they call it the music of the spheres as well.
Yes, yes.
Detailed information on the comet can be found in Samuel Danforth's book written in 1665 on his observations of the Great Comet of 1664. Astronomer Cassini also observed the sudden appearance of a round dark spot on Jupiter's surface on December 5th, 1690. This spectacular scene on Jupiter was also observed by King Louis XIV's court astronomers. See the apotheosis of Alexander the Great and Cyrus the Great, page 4. That's where they can read about this. So anyway, there's another question that I want to answer. What does the Earth flip 180 degrees during a pole shift? And as far as I know, no, it doesn't. And Velikovsky never said that the Earth flipped 180 degrees either. When a comet or planet approaches, and from the pyramids being built to true north, the degrees off, it seems like it's only up to 23 degrees, no more than that, or less, or very little. Although he mentions that the ancients say Jupiter changed its position relative to Earth, east to west, because we passed it, like I said. So it changed where it raised and where I don't know what it's called, the rise and setting of it. And what he does talk about is about the Earth standing still, that the ancients mentioned that the Earth seems to stop rotating. The sun didn't disappear, is that the Earth stops rotating for some reason for a period of 24 hours or more. So in half of the planet, there were records of the sun not coming up, being in darkness for over 24 hours. And on the other side of the Earth, there were records of the sun not going down, but being daylight for 24 hours or more. So that's what he said. And he did mention axis shift. So anyway, I just wanted to just clarify that. And Earth in Upheaval, that's where people need to go and read. And I'm done. That was a lot of talking, fast talking. Do you have any questions? Any more questions? Craig? Can you hear me, Jesse?
Oh, yes, I can hear you. I was on mute. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
I was typing and people said they could hear me hitting the keys. That was wonderful. I love that.
All right,
Wow.
now maybe I can answer a few more questions that
Yes.
you want me to answer.
Guys, she's 6 hours ahead of me, so I know it's getting late there, and she's probably
That's
getting
fine.
tired.
I'm happy to. It's okay. I'll let you know when
Okay,
I'm tired.
okay. All
Because
right.
we were
Well,
late, what, an hour or 40 minutes?
yeah, we
So it's
started
fine.
an hour late. Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, we got going about two, I think.
Yeah, I have so much information. We can do many, 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 many
Oh,
videos.
yeah.
Don't worry.
That's great. Everybody seems
No
to love
worries.
it, you know. And for me, it's just brand new information. It's stuff that
Yeah,
I've never heard before, you know.
cool. Well, it's like a new version of things that it might be interesting to go and check out. Like I said, it might not be the whole truth, but it's interesting and kind of matches a lot of the
Oh
chronologers'
yeah, oh yeah. It's
technologies.
very interesting. Yeah, I want more. You know, what
Cool.
I'm gonna do is probably listen to a few of your cosmogony and mythos and cosmogony videos.
Hmm.
I like to put a video on and even sleep. You know, wake up.
Hmm.
It's probably at the end of the video where I missed a lot. I just go
Hmm.
back. You know,
Hmm. Right.
eventually after a while I hear it all. But it's kind of hard to just sit in a chair and listen to something. But if I'm laying down or something like that, it's easy, you know, makes it interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
should I
Go
go through
ahead.
some of these questions and see if the ones I can answer and the ones that
Well,
I don't know to say no, I don't know, or should we
Am
say
Man wants to know if do you have a YouTube channel?
no, I don't. But I
No.
might start a bit shoot. Yeah, I don't know. There's so much censorship on some videos and comments and stuff that I don't know if there's any worth it to do any. But I might. I might.
Yeah, yeah, it's something to consider down the road, you know.
Okay, I might
Yeah,
check it out.
Ceres and Pluto.
But
Ceres and
people were
Pluto on the
saying that
same plane.
I'm sorry. They were saying that my voice was low, but do they hear me better? I hope they heard enough. Okay, great, great. Sorry
Yeah,
for this.
yeah, no, I fixed
All right.
that. Yeah.
Okay, back to the question. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Um,
Bad.
Slightly slanted wants to know, or when he's asking me, is Ceres and Pluto? I don't think they are on the same plane. I think that Pluto is on this weird 17-degree plane, but
What?
Ceres
I'm
is
sorry. What
in
did you
the
say?
asteroid belt, right?
What did you say again? I didn't get that.
He's saying that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. He's saying is Ceres. I don't know. Is he asking me or is he making a
Oh, he's
statement?
asking. Okay.
Yeah, Ceres and Pluto are on the same plane. Well, I did not know
I
that
don't
because
know.
Ceres is the biggest
Yeah, it's kind of far, right?
planetoid, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's in the
Sirius.
asteroid
Sirius
belt.
is a star, isn't it?
Well,
It's a
that's the
star.
S series. Yeah,
Sirius.
Sirius.
The
Yeah,
star
Sirius.
Sirius. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. No,
but
probably not. He needs to listen to Wenninger. He's talking about all that. And Eugene
yeah,
Badershop. They're the experts.
yeah, yeah. You know, and it's been proven so many times. Sometimes the experts are the worst ones to ask because they're the ones that are the most entrenched into their belief
Yes.
system.
Yes. That's why I can say anything I want. I'm
Yes,
not
yeah,
an
that's
expert.
absolutely right. I mean, Walt Thornhill makes that point.
Yeah, it's hard.
several times.
Understandable. But
Yeah.
anyways, one thing that I understood is that let's see, we might be connected following the Birkeland current that attaches to the Pleiades, and that's why the Pleiades were so important in the past, and
Interesting.
Sirius,
Yeah.
and Sirius too,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Sirius, like
Serious.
they were measuring time by Sirius, the Zodiac cycle. Well, that's very important, right? So that would make it important. But maybe we're connected to that Birkeland current. And I know there's a Z pinch where the sun is, but maybe back, behind and forward, we'll have those connections. So that's all I have to say, and about that
Yeah.
for now.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a little, I have some, like I said, some theories about maybe how. Okay, so maybe I'll say it. If you look at the planets, and if you look at a side view of the Birkeland current, you know that it has like concentric circles, and it's probably, you can go to the picture on the website, to the plasma images of plasma images. You'll see right there it is. So you see the concentric circles, and I imagine this is probably how it works, that the sun is at the center
Hmm.
of that. If there's like a big Birkeland current, there's different scales, and the planets are going around, and that's why some of them are counter-rotating, because the Birkeland currents counter-rotate. Maybe, I don't know, I'm thinking.
Yes, they
And
do. Yes.
yeah, so maybe the planets are in these different sheets of these lines that you see in the concentric circles, but going behind the sun, like I said. And
Hmm.
maybe some planets, bigger planets, like let's say Mercury is in the front in one of the current sheets, because there's only a certain amount, I think it's 5.
Yeah.
And then maybe Uranus is in the same current sheath as Mercury, but Mercury is way forward, and Uranus is way further back. And
Mhm.
maybe that's when that would, that would explain when there are alignments, when there are
Sorry, my son
alignments.
walked in.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Maybe that would explain when there are certain alignments of the planets, there is an electric connection, because they could be on the same Birkeland current. And so if they're in the same area, like
Hmm.
moving around the same area, or I don't know, I'm just thinking
Yeah.
maybe that would be one
No,
reason.
no, you're
Anyways.
right. You're right on because even Wall talks about it. The the planets just sort of tickle each other where they're at.
Mhm.
They're in the points where they're the most acclimated to the charged system. That's why when you see a comet or a comet come into the inner solar system, it has those tails on it. That's actually an electrical reaction. It's not
Yeah,
gas dust. Yeah.
yeah. And should I make some comments about these comments or not? No.
Oh yeah, sure. Feel free. Yeah, it's your.
Okay, yeah. Okay, well, thank you everyone for your kind comments. That's really nice. I'm glad you're enjoying the website and the information, and just like, more to ponder on and make your own conclusions, do the research, and hope it helps with your quest of finding the history of the solar system and the origin of mankind. And
Yeah,
anyways, yeah.
yeah. That's
I
great.
have,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah,
I have so many, somebody had so many questions. So yeah, they can write them down, and just we can answer them in future recorded or live streams, whichever we want to do, you want to do. And then Graham Hancock says that most of the megalithic sites are underwater, and that's probably true. And yeah, I mean, there's so much, there's so much water that came in with the floods, with all the
yeah,
different floods, that Yanaguni. I love that one in Japan.
yeah,
They
yeah,
say it's kind of like a natural thing, and it could probably, it sounds like, it looks like it could be man-made. So there's, the city of Dwarka, which was Krishna city? Krishna. I think it was Krishna city that sank, I think, during the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata covers many, many, many catastrophes. It's not just one. So it's long. but they also discovered that, and there's just probably a ton of amazing stuff that is just buried down there. Also by Cuba, they have found some pyramids, and also in Antarctica. I'm sure there's a ton of stuff in there. Then let's see. The apostles are astrologists. Astrologers. Yes, all the prophets were astrologers. That's where they
Absolutely.
would prophetize.
Did you see my last video yet? Did you see my last video?
Yeah, I was watching parts today.
Okay. Yeah,
I
I
watched
talk a
I
little
didn't
bit
watch the
about
whole thing.
astrology. I had no idea. Yeah.
Oh, I mean astronomers. Sorry, but astrologers too. Well, they were
They were
linked with
both.
each other. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, but they were astronomers or
Yeah.
astrology. Okay, yeah, I messed that up.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. And of course, it's all related. Very, very good. And the electricity. Oh, yes, that's another. What Noah Webster talks about how the human psyche and physical diseases or states of health are affected by the moon, by the CMEs. So that's all electrical. So of course it has to affect us, like in many ways.
Oh, I
Anyway.
have to ask you one other question. You said that you use an infrared light lamp.
Yes.
So you need to give me a recommendation because I was looking at them. There's quite a few to choose from.
Oh, just get the cheapest one. That they use them for chicken coops, or you can get a really expensive one for like beauty treatments, because allegedly they keep you young as well. Yes, and they heal tissue for inflammation or muscle strains, which is what I use it for pain. You just buy the cheapest one, or 100 or 150 watts, and you just put it in a metal, I have it like in an arm that you use for drafting, but you can use it for any metal lamp holder that won't burn, of course, that can
How
stand
long
there.
do you use it for?
Well, you can read about it 20 minutes, I think, at a time.
Yeah, that's
And
what I read.
Yeah, far enough so it doesn't burn you, obviously. You shouldn't have oil on your skin, and you shouldn't put on your head because it will cook your brain.
Well, I just got done reading another article yesterday about salmon. Humans seem to have a link with salmon where their doctors are finding out that we can actually regenerate cartilage in our extremities. So if you put that together with infrared light, you could do some major repairing. Yeah, I'm going to. Yeah. I'm interested in
it's
that.
not high tech, but
No,
it's
but that
work.
says a lot. We get skin cancer from this sun. That is another indicator that we're not native to this sun.
No, and the skin gets dry. Our skin gets dry and peels and chaps and all kinds of things.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyways, they asked me if I know the origin of December 25th and the death of Jesus on the cross. Okay, December 25th. I think that has to do with Saturnalia. They have to go and read Saturnalia because it has to do with Saturn and the menorah and all of that, and Christmas comes from there. They have to read Velikovsky. He has really great information about that. So go into the beginning and in Velikovsky's archive and read in the beginning, and he talks about Saturn and Saturnalia.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, Novas. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
Okay, Saturnalia. Saturnalia is when Saturn went nova. And when novas occurred, big amounts of water are ejected. And so that's why we get large amounts of water, in case people don't know that. But anyways, go ahead, and then I'll finish this question.
No, I'm just listening.
Okay, the death of Jesus on the cross being a literal reference to the location of the sun in the sky on December 20. No, I don't think so. I already read about that, so they can go back and read more about the Jesus happenstance that I came across, all that information. But I don't think so. I don't think it has to do with the sun being on that location, unless something else. But yeah, the Anno Mundi, that is, people have to go and research that. Why were they calculating the end of the world to happen in the year 500 AD? And then why did they recalculate it to 2000 AD? What is it they're looking at? That's kind of interesting. What is it that's supposed to happen cyclically or come by cyclically? And obviously comments, like I said, and and planets all change their orbits constantly, even the sun. So we cannot say this day on this time exactly something's going to happen because things change. Anyways,
Yes,
let's
yes,
see.
they do.
Yeah, the cosmos, the solar system is a very uh, happening place. It's just changing constantly. Oh yeah, and I was going to say about the rings of the nova of the planets that are in the solar system. You know, they're disappearing at a very fast rate, and I think Ted Holden put some kind of post on Facebook about this, that they're disappearing fast. So if they're disappearing really fast in our lifetime, we can see them disappearing
Yeah,
fast. That
yeah,
means that they're very recent. I'm
yeah,
sorry. They would have not been lasting for 40,000 or 30,000 years if these ones are going away within our observable time by astronomers. Anyways, then just like the Mayan calendar, and people thinking it was the end of the world, it was just the end of an age. Then you
yes,
start again, everything is a cycle. Yes, there's never the end of the world. It's just it gets kind of messed up and then it restarts. And I don't know what's going to happen with the yugas. Some people say a golden age is coming. I hope so. I certainly hope so, because where we are is a pretty kind of crappy place to be.
yeah,
But I don't know. And the Mayans do talk about Hunapku, which is the center. It lives or inhabits. It's like a creator god or force that inhabits the center of the galaxy. They do say that, and I did learn all about this before, many years ago, like 10 years ago. They say that it pulses energy. That's how they put it.
yeah.
Pulses energy, conscious energy that changes the solar system and the planets and the whole galaxy. So maybe there
Mm.
is something to that. Maybe there's I don't know, some kind of cycle there, but it could be interesting. And Bagashov talks about that too. He does talk about that. In the paper that I shared in the website, he talks about that past catastrophes and maybe future catastrophes could be related to Birkeland currents going through some part of, like, I don't know, highly energized or something like that. Which, by
Yeah.
the way, there's another scientist that I don't know if I've mentioned him, but it's called Dmitriev. Alexei Dmitriev from 1985 or 95, I think he published some papers that I read that about 10 years ago or 9 years ago. And he
Alexev
actually,
Dmitri.
Alexei Dmitriev,
Oh,
yes, and
right down.
the link is in my website. He
Okay.
actually said it, so he said it differently. He said it that not Earth, the solar system is entering a very highly energized, like high plasma um, area in the solar system. Or in space, sorry, in space. The sun has come into this highly energized area in space, and it could be a highly charged plasma. And then he explained how all the planets, he's a geologist, by the way, a scientist, but he explained how all the changes on Earth, like the storms and the earthquakes and volcanoes and other planets, are getting excited. They're just getting amped up, and they're causing catastrophes on Earth more than usual, and on the other planets. And he says that this causes mutations. There's mutations on Earth also due to the X-rays and other things that are coming through those Birkeland currents. But I thought that was interesting because it matches this Birkeland current thing that Bagashov is talking about in the Mayans.
Yes. Tess, how did the Vedic traditions figure out the yugas and the
Oh,
precession?
I already answered
Oh,
that.
you answered it. Okay, because I was
Yeah.
busy tweaking the knobs trying to get it to work.
You or
So
he?
yeah, I'll have to go back and listen to it. That's cool. If you did,
Well, I can
how
tell
do
you.
you take? I'm sorry.
I can say it again, but you can
No,
just
no,
listen.
no. That's
Actually,
okay.
you
It's
have it
okay if you
recorded.
answered it because I was reading it here on my notes. Also, what's your take on this whole thing with
You know?
people that are
Oh,
saying, Nibiru and all that? What are you thinking? What do you take on that? What's your take?
well, I talk about that's another misinterpretation of Nibiru
Mm-hmm.
on the usage that it was just one planet that comes back every 3,600 years. Now, interestingly enough, I think, and that was by Sitchin who mentioned that, but the word Nibiru, it is, I'll clarify it, it is mentioned in the ancient texts of the Sumerians, in the astronomical text, and the text like Marduk was Nibiru. It means planet of crossing, a planet that crosses a comet or Saturn or the moon, or it could be any planet that crosses the orbit of Earth and causes cataclysms. And they call it a reddish star, by the way, which is very interesting, a reddish star, okay? Yeah. And so that's why some people depict it with horns, like the horns like a comet. So they don't know why they're doing that, but it's probably, I don't know if it would have horns. It's possible, right? I mean, planets would get horns, which is the electrical plasma discharges. And according to how they are pointing to the sun, like a comet, like the one I read, that it looked like a bearded comet, and then it looked like a spear, depending on where we are looking, like Earth, from where in Earth, which latitude, which country, and where the comet is as relative to us from the sun, the tail will look in different ways. It can look like a beard, like a cone, like a pyramid, like a tube, like a cross, like horns. Yeah, and I explain all that in the book. And so did I answer your question? Oh, yeah, Nibiru. Yeah. So Nibiru is really, it could be any comet and any planet. Yeah. And there are comets coming in and planets coming in and things happening, but no one should be afraid, really, because, I mean, really, if you like, do you really want to live forever on this planet?
Yeah.
I don't.
And nobody gets out alive. Have you ever heard of Walter Russell?
Walter Russell? Yes. Yes, I just can't remember what he talks about, but just remind me a little bit, and then it'll come back to me.
Well, he was alive in the earlier part of the 20th century, and he was saying that the universe was electric. Okay. This is something that he wrote right here. Immortal truth, all knowledge exists in the mind universe of light. All knowledge is obtained by becoming one with that source. The universe and its simple principle of creation as one unit repeats it over and over, endlessly and without variation, as evidenced by the universal heartbeat.
That's nice.
Yeah, it is, and it makes you think, and they talk about the Akashic records. It's the same thing. And the scientists today who's talking about that, I can't remember his name. Rupert Sheldrake. He's saying the same thing, basically.
Right. Yes. Right. So should I answer a few more questions here?
Anyway,
should I answer I'd like to answer maybe the Enoch and Thoth question, because that's a good one. Well, if people go to the genealogy of the gods, they can see who Thoth is and who Enoch is, and they're half brothers, actually. I figured that out.
That's an interesting duo. Yeah.
Part 10. Just browse Enoch or Enoch. Yeah, but good genealogy, that will explain a lot. And I mean, all these people were giving the secret knowledge to keep. So there was a lot of people, like I said, it was a big family that had their, nephews and their uncles, cousins, children. So they all had their little bits here and there. And if you believe the text, what they say, and why not? I mean, I think, why not?
Right.
What's a big deal? They look like us. It's not like they're not reptiles, by the way. That whole thing about the reptilians, that comes from their depictions as serpents, because that's what they saw in the sky. So if they depicted themselves as serpents, they would be like, oh, okay, oh, that God is powerful. Oh my gosh, no, I'm afraid.
And I sure hope so.
Yeah, that's why. Well, that's why.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we do have a reptilian brain, but I don't
a little bit of
subscribe to them that they are shapeshifters. The shapeshifting that I know about is what they said, like they represent the planet and they control the planet. So when they saw the planet going crazy, they were like, oh yeah, that's the God right now controlling the planet, and so is shape shifting. They shape shift. So
Yeah.
that's what that shape shifting thing means. But that's my opinion, of course. Anyone can
Right.
can
Right.
live
It
that.
could be
Anyway,
anything.
so
Yeah.
that's just my
Yeah.
opinion. And
Well,
then
Tess, it's been 2 hours and 10
yeah,
minutes. So,
okay, so we're
uh,
good.
it's been a good long time, and I know that it's late where you're at, and I know you're probably tired. You've been very gracious to come on for us and answer our questions.
Thank you. Thanks
I've
for the.
loved it. I've had a great time. I'm sorry for the discombobulation in the beginning, but that's the story of my life.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, yeah, we
Well,
had fun.
yeah. So,
Yeah,
anyways, thank you,
yeah,
and thanks for all the questions, and hopefully we'll answer them in a PDF. Maybe I can. Yeah, I guess I can answer
yeah.
them
You
some other
you
time,
can
or
come back
however.
anytime.
Yeah, however people want to do it. I can.
We love you. You can come back anytime here. You're welcome
Thank you.
anytime.
Okay. Well, good night, everyone, and
All
take
right,
care.
all right. Yeah,
Talk
come back
soon.
again. I'll talk soon. Thanks a
Okay.
lot. All
Bye.
right. Good night. Bye.
For all the questions, and hopefully we'll answer them in a PDF. Maybe I can. Yeah, I guess I can answer
Yeah,
them some other
you
time,
can
or
come back
however.
anytime.
Yeah, however people want to do it. I can.
We love you. You can come back anytime here. You're welcome
Thank you.
anytime.
Okay. Well, good night, everyone, and
All
take
right.
care.
All right. Yeah,
Talk
come back
soon.
again. I'll talk soon. Thanks a
Okay.
lot. All
Bye.
right. Good night. Bye.